So now that the incredible Season 3 of Invincible has concluded, it's time for me to return to what I do best, predictions. Specifically for Season 4 of Invincible, which is going to absolutely blow us all away. I've spent some time doing my homework, like rereading this section of the comics multiple times, rewatching all of Season 3 again, and scouring the internet for as much information as I could to give you the best predictions I possibly can. I put a lot of work into this video, so before we get started, if you could make sure to leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to this channel, I would appreciate it more than you know. Also, leave a comment, tell me what you thought of these predictions down below. Before we get started, I just want to mention this video will contain heavy spoilers both for Season 4 and more of Invincible and for the Invincible comics. So if you don't want any spoilers for either of those, I would just stop watching right now. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. I'll start by going through this section of the comics and discuss issue by issue what I think will make it into Season 4, and then I'll cover any additional information we have about Season 4, and then I'll try to map it all out episode by episode. Then at the end, I'll throw in some bonus predictions for the season. Sound good? Good. I'll put time codes in the description if you want to jump around. Alright, let's get into it with the comics. I think going through all of the issues from around this point in the comics will give us a good idea of where Season 4 will go and prevent us from missing anything too important. But I do just want to point out that while Invincible is a very comic accurate show, it still differs from the comics in a variety of ways. So many stories from the comics will be changed or just left out altogether. While my predictions will take these changes into account, it's impossible to know what they'll change and how they change it. I just want to mention this now in case they change stories from the comics and it results in my predictions being wrong. One of the biggest ways the show differs from the comics is with the timing of things. The show will adapt stories from the comics but in completely different places than where they happen in the comics. Because of this, I think we should look at just a few of the storylines that didn't make the cut for Season 3 but could still be included in Season 4, starting with Issue 56. Mark finds out Amber's being abused, so he whoops her boyfriend's ass. I do not think we'll be seeing this in Season 4, as I think the character of Amber in the show is completely different from the Amber in the comics, and I don't really know what point that would serve in the show, especially now. Issue 57. Mark is asked by Cecil to bring in Wolfman for killing his wife, but Mark finds out Wolfman didn't kill his wife, so Mark helps him out. I also don't really think we'll be seeing this in Season 4, as it mainly serves as another opportunity for Mark and Cecil to butt heads after they're falling out, and I don't see that being necessary in Season 4 unless they change it majorly. Honestly, those are really the only major storylines from before Conquest in the comics that I could possibly see them trying to squeeze into Season 4. Pretty much everything else from that chunk of the comics got adapted in Season 3, which left us off at Issue 65 from the comics. In fact, it ends almost exactly how Issue 65 ends in the comics, just like I predicted too. So let's go forward from here. Issue 66 and 67 show Nolan and Alan returning to the Coalition and starting to collect items and people that can hurt Viltrumites. Two of my favorite issues of the comic, period. I think we're absolutely going to see this in the show. It's all very important. I think they may expand it some and show us some more of the collecting of items than they do in the comics. Issue 68 introduces dinosaurs. Mark gets traumatized by Eve's dad, Oliver gets a new suit, Sequids get ready to invade, Conquest escapes, and Eve is pregnant. I think all of that is for sure going to be adapted. One way I could see them changing it is I think Conquest Escape may be different than the comics, as Cecil in the show seems a bit smarter than his comics counterpart, but they could also just keep it the same. Issue 69. We get Universa and the Sequids popping up in the same day. Universa, I'm not 100% sure about. The Sequid story kind of calls for Mark to be fighting somewhere else when it starts, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Universa. She does play a role in Mark's development later on, and I could see them expanding her story in the show to be more important, but I could also see them just replacing Universa with another villain or conflict, but I'll get into that more later on. Issue 70, the conclusion of the Sequids and Mark killing Russ. I definitely think we'll see all of the Sequid story in the show, and I'm pumped about that. The way this version of the Guardians tackles this conflict is some of the most competent superhero work we've seen any version of the Guardians do, and it's awesome. Issue 70 and a half, or Invincible returns. This issue kind of serves as a big turning point for a variety of reasons. Invincible and Cecil's relationship is restored to some extent. It's our first time ever meeting Thrag. Mark gets his classic suit back, and most notably, Nolan returns to Earth to tell Mark it's time for war. I think all this will be adapted undoubtedly, though I don't think we'll get the little recap thing in there. I don't really think that's necessary for the show. Issue 71. The Flaxen invasion that sees the disappearance of Robot and Amanda. Mark telling Eve goodbye, Nolan and Debbie seeing each other for the first time again, and all of them leaving for the war when their ship gets blown up. I think we'll see pretty much all of this, but all of it will be greatly expanded. There's almost no way they could keep Debbie and Nolan's interaction as simple as it is in the comics. Issue 72. The first battle of the Viltrumite War. Conquest versus Mark Round 2. This issue is so badass, and we'll definitely be seeing all of it for sure. I can't wait to see how they may expand on Conquest and Mark's fight, and maybe we'll get to see some more of the side fights as well. Issue 73. The first phases of the war. We see Battlebee, Space Rider, Alan, and Tech Jacket lead the first few battles of the war, while Oliver and Nolan bond while Mark is healing on the alien planet. I think we'll see all of this, though I think they may expand a bit on some of the first battles, as we don't really see a ton of them in the comics. Issue 74. The Battle on Telescria. The Viltrumites attack the headquarters of the Coalition of Planets, but Mark, Nolan, and Oliver return just in time to save them. Turns out there's a traitor in the Coalition. So I think we're seeing all of this, and it's going to be pretty epic. Issue 75. The Coalition assembles the most badass team in existence and heads to Viltrum to finish the job. We get some awesome, insane fights before the guys get together and blow up the whole damn planet. This is our first time ever seeing Thrag fight, and he almost kills Oliver and does kill Thetis very easily. I think we're going to see all of this for sure. Issue 76, the end of the battle. Thrag fights Nolan and Mark and almost kills both of them, while everyone else is getting their asses kicked. Thrag spares them and everyone dips out. Mark wakes up days later on a Coalition ship to Nolan being alive, Alan being the new boss of the Coalition, and Oliver still kicking it somehow. The issue ends with Mark realizing the Viltrumites went to Earth. We're getting all of this, but I expect to see the fight between Thrag, Nolan, and Mark to be expanded. Issue 77. Mark, Nolan, and Tech Jacket head back to Earth and discover the Viltrumites are on Earth, but Thrag is prepared to surrender as long as they let them repopulate, and they hesitantly agree to this. We're getting all of this for sure as well. Issue 78. Mark and Nolan check in on Debbie. Cecil runs into Nolan. Mark reconnects with Eve, who has grown a bit, and Cecil tells Sinclair they won't have to use the Reanimarks. And the issue ends with Alan reading a message left by Thetis about the Scourge virus. I think we'll be getting all of this in the show. However, I firmly believe this is as far as we'll get in the comics for Season 4. But it's hard to really explain why without getting into mapping out how I think it will all play out. But I want to cover any additional information we know about Season 4 before we get into mapping it all out. So here's that section. We really don't know a ton about Season 4 officially, other than this image that was shared. We know it's coming next year, which makes a lot of sense because they got an early renewal for Season 4 over the summer, which allowed them to be working on Season 4 all this time as well. It seems obvious they have, since they also confirmed that voice acting is complete for Season 4. I think that's a really good sign, honestly, and it makes me believe they're really committed to releasing a season a year like Kirkman has said he wants to. They also revealed that Thrag has been cast, which, if all the voice acting is done, that means everyone has been cast. And that's really exciting to think about for characters like Dinosaurs, Space Racer, and Tech Jacket, who will also likely play a large role in Season 4. The main reason I wanted to include this section is because of this last bit of info. Invincible has been cast. Just kidding. The new Dark Blood storyline. I've already done a video explaining my theory for how I think that story might pan out, so you should definitely check that out if you haven't. But we do know that this story will take place in Season 4, which is critical for mapping out how the whole season will play out, which is a great segue to our next section, mapping out how I think Season 4 will play out. I'm going to go episode by episode covering what I think will happen and why I think that. Since there are a lot of ways certain stories could play out, I will likely try to mention all of the alternate ways I could see them playing out just to cover all of our bases. Alright, let's get into it. Like last year, I think it's going to be easier to start with the finale and then work our way backwards a little bit. I mentioned earlier that I think Season 4 will cover up until issue 78 and nothing more. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Where the hell else would they end it? I'm joking. kind of. I do believe that, but the reason is also deeper than that. In a typical 3-act structure, you have something called a midpoint. A midpoint is a pivotal plot point, typically occurring around the halfway mark of the story, that forces a significant shift in the narrative, raising the stakes and often leading to a new direction for the protagonist. For the overarching story of Invincible, all 144 issues, the midpoint of the story is definitely the reveal that the Viltrumite War is over and the Viltrumites are living among humans. It forces a significant shift in the narrative, raises the stakes, and leads to a new direction for our protagonist. Everything significant that happened before this moment was leading to it, and nearly everything significant that happens after this moment is impacted because of this moment. Robert Kirkman has stated that Invincible will likely run for 8 seasons. He has stated different numbers of seasons than that before, but he also said to Direct recently that he says a different number every time he's asked. Since the other numbers he throws out are also around 8, I think 8 seasons makes sense for Invincible. Let's just assume for the sake of this video that there will be 8 seasons of Invincible. If that is the case, and if they continue following the 8 45-minute episodes per season, what would be the exact middle episode of the series? Season 4, Episode 8. Now, midpoints don't have to happen at the exact middle of the story, but since the medium of television follows an episodic format with clear, structured runtimes, it's easier to place key narrative moments in the episodes where they make the most sense. Therefore, it would make the most sense in the bigger picture to make Season 4's finale the midpoint of the whole story. Additionally, what other issue could they realistically end the season on? Since there's a year-long wait between seasons, imagine the comics had to include a similar gap between story points. If they ended on issue 77 or 79, the break would disrupt moments that are too closely connected. But with issue 78, we get resolution without diving too far into the next arc, making it the perfect stopping point. Fans have theorized in seasons previously that the finale would end on a cliffhanger, and I anticipate that fans will theorize that similarly for this season's finale. I don't think that's going to happen. There's no precedent that they would do that, and no other known reasons why they might. That doesn't mean it's completely impossible, but come on, man. I think Season 4 will end almost exactly like issue 78 ends, with Mark saying, "The war is over, but we didn't win," and Alan discovering the Scourge virus will be the post-credit scene. Now, we know the finale has got to have a big bloody beatdown, because there's a pretty clear precedent for that in this show. So, what will the big fight be in the finale? I think it's easy to assume that the finale will just be the entire final battle of the war. There is some issues with putting the entire battle in the finale, but I'll get into that later when I'm discussing alternate ways I could see the season playing out. For now, I think that we can assume the finale will start with the Coalition heading to or arriving at Viltrum, and then we get that whole battle ending with everyone fleeing, and then we get Mark Nolan and TJ going back to Earth and discovering Thrag, and you know the rest. The strongest reason I think the finale will contain all of the battle is because there's also a very strong precedent in the show that every episode 7 ends with the big "we're about to fight" moment. Mark seeing Nolan kill Immortal and flying up to talk to him, Mark getting a call from Engstrom, and of course Mark and Conquest flying towards each other. Is it possible they could abandon this precedent for the show? Yeah, of course. But the all-time greatest "we're about to fight" moment and all of the comics has to be this spread right here. Argue all you want, but this is so incredibly badass and fits the precedent so well that I'm almost certain that episode 7 will end with this moment gearing up for the end of the war. Now, I know it may be annoying to jump back and forth like this, but it's kind of annoying to go through all of the episodes backwards. So we got the end of 7 and all of 8 mapped out, but now we're going to go back to the start so we can fill in the rest. Episode 1. I think episode 1 will adapt issues 66, 67, and 68. I think the episode will follow pretty close to the comics, meaning they'll follow all of Nolan and Alan's shenanigans from 66 and 67, and then cut to Mark from issue 68 towards the end. Initially, I thought the episode might divide up some of issues 66 and 67 stories, and intercut them with the stuff that's happening on Earth, which I still think is a possibility, but I think it's unlikely. I think the episode will start with Nolan explaining why Viltrumite numbers are low, then they'll return to the Coalition and begin getting sent on missions, like retrieving Space Racer and the Ragnars. I also think they may expand on some of the smaller adventures like the ones from this spread. Then I think we'll go back to Mark on Earth, where we'll see him fight Dinosaurus, go to dinner with Eve's parents, check in with the prison, see Oliver's new suit, and find out Eve is pregnant. and then we'll see that the Sequids are gearing up, and the episode will end with Conquest escaping. I do think it's possible that they'll expand Conquest escape to make Cecil look less like a dumbass, like maybe what the sonic device in Conquest had, but it doesn't have as strong of an effect on him or something. Who knows? Then I think the post-credit scene will be Thetis revealing the Scourge virus to Nolan. Then the season would be bookended by post-credit scenes with Thetis revealing the Scourge virus to someone. I could be completely off with that, but I think it would be pretty cool. Honestly, I could see Eve's pregnancy reveal, Conquest escaping, or the Sequids gearing up to be the post-credit scene if the episode were to cover all of 68. All of those kind of play out like a post-credit scene, and it doesn't really matter which order we see them in, so any of them would work. Episode 2. I believe Episode 2 will adapt issues 69 and 70, Universa and the Sequids. I honestly think this episode will follow pretty closely to the comics. The episode will start with Universa showing up and Mark and Eve going to deal with it at the same time the Sequid invasion starts, and we get to see the new Guardians in action. Then, after Mark finally beats Universa, Cecil shows up to ask for his help. Mark joins the fight and whoops some ass, but things start to get hairy, so Invincible kills Russ. However, this is where I think the episode will stray from the comics. I think we'll get Robot and Cecil's immediate reaction, but then I think Mark will suddenly disappear right before the episode ends, setting up the Damien Darkblood story for episode 3. But we'll get to that in a second. I think the post-credit scene could be the moment with Rudy stomping on a Sequid in the shower because it feels like a post-credit scene, or I'm wrong and we'll see the remainder of issue 70 where Mark goes home and talks to Eve and then Cecil shows up. But I think either way, the episode ends around when Mark kills Russ, because I think that is what we'll set up for episode 3. I think episode 3 will be the new Damien Darkblood story. Since we don't know anything about it, it is next to impossible to make actual predictions, but I have already covered some theories on what I think it could be in my most recent video here. In that video, I covered all the possible ways I could see that story playing out. But for this video, I'll just explain what I think is most likely, and you can check out that video if you don't think this theory makes sense. Basically, I think Damien Darkblood is going to try to summon Omni-Man to hell to bring justice to him and or kill his boss, the Great Beast. I think the spell will summon a Grayson who is a killer on the surface world, and since Mark just killed Russ, it'll be the perfect timing for Mark to get summoned instead. Then we can play into the themes of embracing murder as a solution, and we'll likely get to see Mark fight the Great Beast, which will probably be the devil, essentially. Then I think Mark will find a way to escape and make it back to Earth, where he'll go visit Eve, and that's when Cecil will show up to ask him to talk. Then maybe a post-credit scene with Damien, teasing that they'll do even more with this character in the future. Again, we have next to nothing to go off of for how this story will play out, so I could be completely off about all of this, including when this story will even take place in the season, which could mean I'm probably off about all the episodes, but oh well. Episode 4. I think episode 4 will adapt the issue Invincible Returns. It may sound absurd that this whole episode would only adapt a single issue, but this is honestly a pretty dense issue. I mean, just look at this conversation between Mark and Cecil. Also, there's been episodes in the past that pretty much only adapt one issue, like the Powerplex episode. I think this episode will start with Mark and Cecil's conversation, then the conversation between Eve and William, and Oliver and Debbie. And then where I think we'll veer off from the comics a bit is I think this part with Titan and Mr. Liu will very likely be expanded upon, especially since they changed and expanded the Titan story in season 3. Then, after almost killing again, Mark will go visit Art for a therapy sesh in a new suit. I think it makes a lot of sense for his return to the classic suit to happen right in the middle of the season. Then, Mark will have a conversation with Eve about his killing policy going forward, which is also perfect for the middle of the season. Then the episode ends with, "The time for war is upon us." And of course, the post-credit scene will be Conquest visiting our good friend Thrag, perfectly setting up for the second half of the season. Episode 5. I think episode 5 will adapt issue 71. Again, I know it's just one issue, but I think this one's also pretty dense, and there's a lot of opportunity to expand on stuff with this one. I think there's a chance we do actually get Mark and Eve's little Viltrumite recap pep talk thing at the start of the episode, but I really don't think we need that in the show, but who knows, maybe they'll do a modified version of it. If not, then I think the episode will start with the Flaxen invasion, but definitely expanded upon. I think this could be another great opportunity for our new Guardians team to shine, especially Robot with his aura farming. Maybe we'll even see how Oliver got into this situation in the show. Then, I think we'll get Alan and Nolan recruiting Tech Jacket, which I think is probably the biggest opportunity for expansion from this issue. If they've secured the rights to use Tech Jacket prominently in this season, why would you not take the time to give us a proper introduction to him, especially in the show since we haven't even seen him actually fight? Then, probably tied for the biggest opportunity for expansion is Nolan and Debbie's first interaction since season 1. Debbie is a much more prominent character in the show, and this is a scene that we kind of brush past rather quickly in the comics. God, that's going to be emotional. Speaking of emotional, then I think we'll get Mark and Eve saying bye to each other, which is probably also going to be expanded and somehow even more sad. Really, this whole issue could be expanded upon in so many ways. I mean, for example, we don't even see Mark say bye to his mom, and we have no idea how Cecil even finds out Mark is leaving, which feels like an obvious scene to add since Cecil is quite invested in Earth's protection, and Invincible and Oliver leaving Earth leaves the planet quite unprotected. If the show is going to follow the comics and not show anything on Earth while we follow the Viltrumite War, which I think they will and should, then I think it would make a lot of sense to spend some more time showing us what's going on with all of our Earth characters before we leave them for the rest of the season. Anyways, I think the episode will end how issue 71 does, with the guys heading to war on the spaceship when our good pal Conquest returns. Episode 6. I think episode 6 is going to adapt issue 72 and most of 73. I think the episode will start with the first real battle of the war between Conquest, Lucan, and the other Viltrumite against Alan, Tech Jacket, Nolan, Oliver, and Mark. This fight is going to be so badass. Even if they adapted this fight 1-to-1 and didn't add anything, it would be fire, but you know they're going to add stuff to it and make it even crazier. The highlight of the battle, of course, is Conquest versus Mark round 2. Though I don't think this battle will take up the entire episode. I think this episode will also cover a good chunk of issue 73, showing Thetis starting the war, Alan and Tech Jacket escaping, and Nolan and Oliver bonding while Mark heals. I honestly think this episode will cover almost all of issue 73, but I could see them saving part of it for episode 7, though I think it's probably more likely that they keep all of the intercut montage with the war stuff and Nolan and Oliver's bonding together in one episode, and that's most of issue 73, so I'm not sure where they'd end it if they don't cover all of it. I do think, regardless, the post-credit scene will be Thrag talking to the traitor on Telescria. Episode 7. I think episode 7 will adapt issue 74. Another one-issue episode, but I think it's definitely one that could be expanded upon and fill an episode pretty easily. I think the episode will play out pretty similarly to the comics, but with one large difference. I think this episode would be a perfect opportunity to show us a couple things the comic never really did, and that being Thrag's origins and Thetis' origins. I don't have anything to really back this up evidence-wise, but this would be a great time in the story to get those backstories before we really get into the thick of the war. I could see the episode opening with Thetis' backstory and how he betrayed Argyle, essentially his whole perspective on that, and then we cut to Thetis giving a speech to the Coalition when the Viltrumites attack, just like how issue 74 starts. Then I think we'll see Mark finally waking up on the alien planet and Alan grabbing Tech Jacket. Then, when Thrag is giving this monologue at the beginning of the attack, as he's staring down Argyle's skull, I think we could get Thrag's origins and his whole perspective on all of that. Then, we can cut back to the battle on Telescria when Alan and Tech Jacket show up. As they're getting their asses kicked, the Graysons decide to show up and change the tides by blowing up the ship and throwing it into space. Then, we'll get a bit of aftermath of the battle and the reveal with the traitor before getting to our ultimate shit's about to go down, hell yeah moment that we discussed earlier as being the perfect way to end episode 7. And there we have it, a completely mapped out season 4 of Invincible. I feel pretty confident in this layout based on everything we know, but there are a few ways I could see the season playing out differently. For example, if I'm wrong about my Dark Blood theory, that story could really go just about anywhere in the first 4 episodes. Additionally, I may be off about episode 1 and it could follow Alan and Nolan the whole time, and we just cut back to Mark for the last few minutes, and all we get from Mark is the dinosaurs fight. And then the rest of the Earth stuff in that issue gets pushed back to episode 2, and the Sequids and Universes spill over into episode 3, and Dark Blood spills it into episode 4, but I don't see that being super likely as the show typically likes to keep the stories pretty episodic other than a few small instances, but who knows. I could also see some of the events of the war being shuffled around a bit from how I have them laid out in the last 3 episodes, but I still think the last 3 episodes will cover pretty much all of the Viltrumite War no matter what. Let's move on to some bonus predictions just for fun. I don't have quite as many of these, but I've been yapping for a while, so I think that's okay. First off, I've heard some people suggest that in the show they may cut back to Earth throughout the Viltrumite War, but I don't really think that'll happen, as it would take away from the impact of Mark returning after being gone almost a year. Though, I do think a good amount of the Earth stuff in the first 5 episodes will be fleshed out a bit more to give Eve more of an arc, and characters like Debbie will likely have a more prominent role in these episodes than she does in these issues. Same goes for characters like Rey, who may have her own arc in Season 4. Additionally, there could be other brand new story arcs for this season, like how Rex and Rey's relationship building was a brand new storyline in Season 3. I could very likely see Robot and Amanda getting some more spotlight in Season 4 before they disappear in the Flaxen invasion. I've also seen some people suggest online that the traitor in Telescria will turn out to be Telia, Alan's girlfriend, because of the way she was acting in Season 2. I could see this being the case, as the actual traitor in the comics doesn't have much development to him, but there's a couple reasons I don't see this being the case. First, if Telia is the traitor, she will likely not be around anymore after this, which wouldn't be the biggest deal to work around later on, but it would definitely affect important story moments much later on in the series, like when Telia's brother briefly dates Eve, or when Alan tells Telia he sent Oliver to his death. Could work around those things, but it does make me less confident in this theory. Second, the traitor doesn't really need a ton of backstory, and I think what we get in the comics would work in the show, where we just see him a couple times throughout the season. The last little bonus prediction is that I bet we see Business Baby return. Not even joking. I think Robert Kirkman finds the memes funny, and he confirmed he was alive, so I bet we at least get a cameo. That's pretty much all of the bonus predictions I have, but since it's not that many, let's have a bit of fun before we wrap things up with some fan casting. I may make a full fleshed out video on this later on if you guys would like, which leave a comment if you do. But for now, I'll keep it pretty quick here and just mention my favorite fan cast for each of our new characters this season. Space Racer, Norman Reedus. This one just fits perfectly and would be another Walking Dead actor in the show. For Tech Jacket, I like the idea of Josh Keaton a lot, and he's already been in the show before, so they could definitely get him back. For Dinosaurus, I like Keith David a lot, but I've also seen Andrew Lincoln suggested for another Walking Dead actor, and I don't mind that either. For his human form, maybe TJ Miller or Jay Bruchel or something. I don't know. Finally, Thrag. My personal favorite pick is Ron Perlman. I think his voice acting would stand up greatly next to actors like J.K. Simmons. In that vein, I think Bryan Cranston would also be a great fit for the same reason, and I know Kirkman has mentioned trying to get Cranston for a role before already. I've seen Ryan Hurst thrown out a lot, and while that would be epic, I think it's more likely to be a well-known actor, and I just don't see Hurst nailing the kind of restraint that Thrag regularly displays. Thrag doesn't really seem to yell all that much, but every fan cast TikTok I see, people are always using clips of Ryan Hurst or other voice actors yelling, which is kind of funny. If there's any other characters I didn't get to, it's just because I don't have any ideas for them. If you'd like to see a full-fledged fan casting video for Season 4, let me know in the comments and I can make it happen. Okay guys, I think that just about does it for us today. Those are all of my Invincible Season 4 predictions. It's going to be a legendary season and I cannot wait. The Viltrumite War is one of my favorite arcs in all of the comics. This has been about as in-depth and comprehensive as I can get for a video, and I've spent a ton of time working on it, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If so, definitely leave a like and make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Invincible content and just more nerd content to come now that we'll have a bit of an Invincible break, sadly. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Till next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.
The Nerd Authority.